Chapter 5. Al had been right about Westwater. It knocked our socks off. We were still talking about it as we approached the San Juan River. Al was driving slowly because we were pulling the heavy trailer with gear for a 10-day float. We were suffering from whitewater withdrawal. "Skull was awesome," Adam was saying. "I'll never forget it, especially the look on everybody's face when we dropped into the hole." "I was too busy paddling to notice," Rita shouted. "Maybe if Redhead here was paddling instead of messing around, we wouldn't have gone into the hole. Al missed it by a mile with his raft." "Your mother," Adam teased. Rita reached out and grabbed Adam's t-shirt by the neck and pulled him toward her. "Wears ordinary women's shoes, and if you say anything different—" "Al was rowing, not paddling," Troy said. "You have more control with those oars than with a bunch of paddles." "The part I liked best," Adam said merrily, "was the Room of Doom. We almost got sucked in there the first day. Around and around you go, and you can't get out. That would have been interesting, floating around all day with that dead cow." Pug was chortling. "The part I liked best was when Heather went flying like she was shot out of a gun, and the look on her face when she was suddenly out in the river." Riding shotgun in the van, Heather rolled her head and groaned. It wasn't a pleasant memory, I'm sure. When we dropped into that hole in Skull Rapid in Westwater Canyon, the boat folded like a sandwich made from one slice of bread. Everybody crashed into each other, and when the boat sprang back to its normal length, it catapulted her out just the way Pug said, as if she'd been shot from a cannon. But that wasn't the worst part. She was caught in the hole, and the whitewater recirculated her over and over before spitting her out. It must have felt like she was in a cross between a washing machine and a garbage disposal. Once Heather was rescued, she lost it, got really hysterical. It wasn't pretty to watch. Star and I helped settle her down. After that, the fear never left her eyes. That happened on our first day on Westwater, and then she wouldn't get back on the water for our second and third runs, no matter how much Al counseled her about getting back on the horse. She stayed by the van and waited for us. After our last run through Westwater Canyon, we spent a couple of hours loading the boats with all the overnight gear we'd need for 3 more days of flat floating downstream, all the way to Moab, Utah. Heather got back on board after Al promised it would all be flat. It was. Pretty in stretches, with red cliffs along the river and snow-covered mountains in the background. But it wasn't whitewater. The van rumbled from Colorado into Utah, and we passed through the little towns of Monticello and Blanding. We were nearing the San Juan. It had taken days of work and preparation back in base camp, shopping from Al's shopping lists, packing waterproof metal rocket boxes with a 10-day supply of food, stuffing all our personal gear into huge waterproof bags, and we were exhausted. We'd chattered for hours about Westwater and whatever else came up, but the long drive had finally worn us down, and most people had nodded off. Troy's head was on my shoulder, and I wasn't very comfortable, but I was happy. Only Freddie and I were awake. Freddie, as ever, was studying the countryside like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I looked around at the barren, high desert of southeast Utah. I'd never been out this way with my dad. It didn't look very interesting to me until we drove into Bluff, a tiny town with old buildings made out of blocks of red stone. The huge cottonwoods that lined the road wore their fall colors, and it was warm. We stopped at a gas station and convenience store. It would be our last stop. The put-in for the San Juan River was only 3 miles away. "Last chance for junk food," Adam said with a crazed look as he slapped himself into consciousness. "Let's go in there and clean 'em out." Pug took him seriously. 10 days on the river is a long time." "It's gonna get grim out there," Adam added. "People are gonna kill for a little bag of chips." Pug counted out his available funds. Freddie and Star wandered by him, looking around aimlessly. They never had any money. I'd tried loaning Star some, but there wasn't much she wanted from the material world. Mildly irritated, Al raised his voice. "Keep in mind, we have 3 meals a day packed in the rocket boxes on the trailer. Nobody's gonna starve." "Tell you what," Troy said suddenly. "Pick out whatever you want, everybody. I can cover it." Pug's mouth fell open. "You're kidding." We were all pretty astonished, including Al and the guy at the cash register. Troy shrugged. "I'm serious. That's what money's for, isn't it? Anything in the store you want." Then he flashed his golden smile and said, "No big deal." It was interesting to see how people reacted. As happy as a kid on Christmas morning, Pug had his arms so full he was dropping stuff. The clerk gave him a bag. Adam accompanied Pug around the store for the fun of it, encouraging him to take this and that. At the magazine rack, they picked out Soldier of Fortune for Pug, and Adam got a couple of ninja magazines for himself. He struck a few martial arts poses and went around the store grunting in mock Japanese. I had to laugh, remembering about his moonlit escapades on the rooftops, the roses on the pillows. Rita was on a shopping jag, too. I was just watching. "Come on, Jesse," Troy encouraged me. "It's our last chance. 10 days in the wilderness and all that." "Are you sure? It's going to be a lot." I nodded toward the big hitters. "No problem. My treat. Star, Heather, Freddie, if we're going to have a good time on the river, we're going to need some supplies." I picked out a little junk food, but Star refrained. She was so conscious about what she ate, her body was practically translucent. Not that she was anorexic. Star would eat, as long as it was natural food and no red meat. She and I picked out some lotions and lip stuff, and I talked her into a pair of sunglasses with some colorful loops to hold them on. It was a windfall for the fellow at the counter. Troy never flinched, either. I'd never met anyone that generous before. Heather thanked him, and he said, "For my friends." Freddie was kind of disappearing out the door when Troy said, "Freddie, isn't there anything?" There was a tone in Troy's voice, like his feelings were about to be hurt. I knew he was intrigued with Freddie. He'd never met anyone like him before. None of us really knew who Freddie was. Freddie glanced back at Troy, and he smiled his bright, shy smile. "Sure," he said. "Thanks." He picked out a Hershey bar and a Coke, and that was it. It was dusk. Al drove us to the edge of town, and we stopped at an old stone garage with a half-inflated raft out front and a huge sign that said, "Scenic San Juan River Trips." Al turned around and said, "This should only take a few minutes. They're shut down for the season, but they're going to do our shuttle for us. Drive the van and trailer to the end of the line while we're on the river." It wasn't a few minutes. Apparently Al was having trouble with his shuttle arrangements. We were having a good time in the van, munching on junk food and visiting. The talk turned to the San Juan. What was it going to be like? Pretty boring was the consensus after our wild adventures on the Colorado and Westwater Canyon. Adam's voice turned lunatic. "Give me white water, I say. Give me white water." "So we're supposed to do 10 days on a flat river," Troy said. "And you know why?" "Yeah," Rita blurted, "because Al said that's where he could get a permit." "That's right. That's the only reason. But that's pretty lame if you think about it. Why should hoods in the woods need a permit?" Adam laughed. "That's about like bank robbers applying for a loan. It's Al who needs the permit, not us. We could go anywhere we want." "Vegas," Adam said, just that fast. Rita was shaking her head. "Gotta be L.A. "Miami," Pug insisted. "I'm serious," Troy said. "The keys are in the ignition." Our attention was immediately riveted to those keys, and the sudden significance that Troy had given them. The van crackled with energy. With one stroke, Troy had turned our imaginations up to white-hot. It was a priceless moment. Rita and Pug were going wild, and Adam was slapping Troy on the back. I checked Freddie out. He was amused. Heather was awfully quiet, with a nervous little smile on her face, but if she'd said anything, Rita would have ripped her face off. Troy looked around the van to each of us, and settled us down with the power of his eyes. "We can go anywhere we want," I said softly, trying out the idea. I thought how my dad would feel. He'd find out it wasn't going to be as tidy as he thought to ship me off to a program where he could picture me in a certain box. He'd have to account for my feelings for a change. "Where to?" Rita said impatiently. "Hey, I could show you guys around New York." Troy was shaking his head. That's what they'd expect us to do. And think about how fast they'd pick us up. "We could steal a different car," Pug offered. "Okay, everybody, now think about that trailer we're pulling. It's got 2 boats worth of gear and a 10-day supply of food. I'm thinking if we could get off the roads and get onto a river, not this one, we could slip away and have ourselves a good time." There was plenty of noisy agreement about that. "Hang in there," Troy said, and we hushed up. "The question is, can we launch before they catch us? They'd never guess we're on a river, let alone which one. And it's October. There won't hardly be anyone on the river but us, just like it was at Westwater." "Right on," Pug thundered. We all knew Troy was about to name the river, but nobody had the slightest idea what it might be. "Hurry," Rita said. "Al could come out any minute." "Easy," Troy assured her. Remember, everybody, remember how Al said Skull was a Grand Canyon class rapid? You remember that?" Sure, we answered. Well, we did fine in Skull. Heather took a swim, but big deal, and it was a blast. So why don't we run the Grand Canyon? There followed several moments of total silence, a rare event for the 8 of us. It was an awesome thought, outrageous and inspired. There was a beauty to the idea, grand, wild, and majestic, drawing power and mystery from the canyon itself. You'd have to be awfully nervy to think you could up and run the Grand Canyon, as inexperienced as we were. No adults, just us. The calm broke into a babble of excited voices. "We could do it!" Adam cheered. 10 days of food, Troy added, and all the rafting gear's packed on the trailer. Could we really do it? I asked Troy. Would we make it through? Like Adam said, we were awesome in Westwater. It sure would be fun trying. A thrill of fear went through me. Do we even know where to start? Sure, Lee's Ferry, Arizona. Remember, Al mentioned that's where all the Grand Canyon trips start. We should have Al with us, Heather put in nervously. Hasn't he been down the Grand Canyon 4 times? Rita put her face in Heather's. Are you out of your mind? No permit, get it? You can't go. You think Al's going to help us sneak it? Forget Al. We'll have a lot more fun without him. Heather was trying to catch her breath. But isn't it some kind of crime? What would they do to us? Suddenly I could see myself in a cell, and just that fast I felt all queasy. I'd been in trouble before, but never in jail. Everybody was quiet and looking to Troy. He shrugged. Some kind of larceny, wouldn't it be? I can't expect we'd serve life in prison for moving Al's van a couple of 100 miles and then taking his gear downstream. It'll be obvious we didn't intend to steal any of it. Adam broke a long moment of tense silence as he shouted, Hey, wait a minute. This is perfect. Troy's last name is Larson, right? This will be a case of grand larceny. Everybody groaned, and Pug pounded Adam on the shoulder, then a few more times for good measure. Put him out of his misery, jeered Rita. Adam was mugging only a bit sheepishly. Get it, Rita? Are you sure you got it? Look, Troy said, eyeing the door of the office next to the garage. Al's going to come out of there in a minute, and then this will have been just another bull session. He looked us over again, with blue eyes blazing, taking our measure, and when he got to Freddie, he stopped and stared at him. Freddie, Troy said finally. What do you think, Freddie? We haven't heard from you. The way he said it, and especially considering the timing, I got the idea it all hinged on Freddie somehow. It seemed improbable, but true. Freddie shrugged. For me, It would be worth it. The Grand Canyon? Sure. You bet. Good deal, Troy said. Freddie, who was in the very back seat, leaned forward. We have to make it to the river first. Cops will be looking for us up ahead, after Al puts out the word. But I know some back roads through the reservation. Pug, who'd always seemed to dislike Freddie, roared his approval. Is this really happening? I thought. We aren't just talking about it. Troy slid up to the driver's seat and had Freddie trade out for Heather up front. He put his fingers on the keys and said, It's an adventure. Take us to Lee's Ferry, Freddie. Rita reached forward and grabbed Troy's shoulder. So what makes you think they won't catch us there, smart guy? Troy turned around and gave us a sly smile. In the middle of the night? Chapter 6. We drove out so slowly and quietly, Al never even came to the door of the shop. Within a few minutes, we'd crossed the muddy San Juan and passed the sign that said we were entering the Navajo Nation. The mood inside the van was delirious, an intoxicating combination of excitement and fear. Troy had his foot down on the gas pedal, trying to get off the main road as quickly as we could. Up ahead, dozens of gigantic red formations were catching the last of the sunset. Check it out, Rita crowed. It's like office buildings made of stone. Monument Valley, Freddie said. Here's that side road. Turn at the trading post. Pug's face was practically propped on Troy's shoulder. Let's get some booze and cigarettes, he said. I can pass for 21. Troy drove right on by the trading post and on to the gravel road. If we stop, they're going to pick up on us and we'll have cops on our tail real quick. He's right, Freddie said. Besides, they don't even sell liquor on the reservation. Wise guy, Pug said. Anybody got any cigarettes? Troy ran his hand through his hair. Hey, big fella, we're in great shape. We're off the highway. It's going to be dark soon, and both tanks are full of gas. But if we make any stops, we're going to blow it. Yeah, I'm cool if you are. Hey, Freddie, is that really your name? Federico. I wondered why Pug seemed to dislike Freddie. The way Pug looked at him made me wonder if it was Freddie's dark skin. How come you don't go by Rico, then? Freddie's eyes flashed. I had the feeling he wasn't afraid of anybody, including Pug. 'Cause my name's Freddie, he said. Pug's face returned to Troy's shoulder once again. Need a break driving, buddy? No thanks, Pug. I could drive all night. Driven cross-country lots of times. Star was sitting next to me. She whispered, Can we really run the Grand Canyon, Jesse? That's exactly what I've been wondering, I whispered back. I sure hope so. I'm pretty scared, to tell you the truth. Are you scared? You shouldn't even talk like that. It's negative thinking. You can make something bad happen if you image it. I don't even know what it'll be like, so how can I image it? We could ask the tarot. How about right now? Oh, no, she said softly. Too many influences on the cards. It wouldn't be right in here. So you're going to start down the Grand Canyon without knowing what it would say? Her green eyes were calm. Maybe too calm to be real, I thought. I'm a water sign, Star said. A Pisces. A fish can always swim. A couple of hours passed as we rumbled down the back roads. Everyone in the back was nodding off, even Rita. I was exhausted and slept in fits and starts. Once, I woke up, looked around, and saw only Freddie and Troy awake up front. They were talking quietly, actually communicating with each other. I thought that was a good sign. Our lives were going to depend on those two guys. I noticed Troy checking me out in the rearview mirror. The whites showed all around his eyes. Our driver was totally alert, as advertised. He gave me a thumbs up. I felt good all down my spine. I felt alive. This was going to be an adventure, all right. I didn't go back to sleep. I was too excited. I thought about my dad, how this was much more than he'd bargained for. It would be the ultimate way to show him. Al, too. They both deserved it. We rumbled on into the night, occasionally passing by sleeping Navajo hogans and deserted roadside jewelry stands, and the sense of the isolation into which we were plunging got me to imagining more and more what it might be like to actually be in the Grand Canyon, beyond any help, and trying to make it through alive. I could picture only the vaguest of shapes. The place loomed impossibly huge, mythical, ominous. I remembered the thrashing Heather took in Skull Rapid. Al said that Skull was an 8 on a 10 scale at the level we ran it. What must a 9 or a 10 look like? What would happen to us down there? Brooding more with every passing mile, I actually began to hope that we'd have a flat, or that the van would break down. But it kept rumbling along. We passed a gas station in the middle of nowhere, closed down for the night, and I realized I'd seen a phone booth. Panicky, I leaned forward and touched Troy on the shoulder. "Stop," I said. He looked over his shoulder at me, confused and unwilling. "Stop," I yelled. If anybody had been asleep, they were awake now. Troy brought the van to a stop on the side of the road. "What is it?" I was practically desperate. I didn't care what anybody thought. "I have to make a phone call," I said. "You're kidding," Pug said. He looked around. "She thought she'd make a phone call." I was backing out the side door. Everyone's eyes were on me. I just kept going, got outside, and started running back toward the gas station. Troy caught up with me as I ran. "What are you doing?" "Making a phone call." "Who are you calling?" "My father." He looked sick. He didn't say anything. He just kept jogging. "Don't worry. I won't say where we are or where we're going. I just have to talk to him, okay?" When I got there, Troy stood only about 15 feet away from the booth. I went inside, shut the door, and turned my back to him. I was breathing hard as I asked the operator to make the call collect. I was afraid Madeline would answer. I was so panicky I didn't know what I would do if she answered. My father answered. "Jesse, is that you? Where are you?" I felt so confused. Now what was I going to do? Why was I calling him? "That's not important," I said, still breathing hard, and my heart going wild. "Jesse, are you all right?" Troy, I realized, was standing right by the phone booth. "Sure." "You don't sound so good. Is anything wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong." "Where are you calling from?" Somehow he knew I wasn't where I was supposed to be. What was it I wanted to tell him? "Look, Dad, we're going to do something, okay?" "Jesse, talk to me. You can talk to me. What is it you're going to do?" I looked up into Troy's face. He was pretty unhappy, and he was signaling with his finger across the throat. I wasn't answering my dad. I was so confused. "Jesse, I have confidence in you. I know you'll do the right thing. Don't make any choices you won't want to live with, okay?" "Sure, Dad," I sniffled. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. I wanted to say, "I love you." I felt like it might be the last chance, but I didn't. I don't know if I couldn't. I only know I didn't. "Jesse?" "I'll be okay, Dad. Bye." Quickly, I hung up the phone. Troy and I didn't talk about it, and I was too disoriented, too guilty, even to think about how pushy Troy had been. When I got back in the van, Rita said with those beady black eyes, "So, who'd you call?" "My father, all right?" "Jesse didn't say anything," Troy explained as he started up the van. "So I could have called my mother," Rita wailed. "You guys are really considerate, you know that?" Adam laughed and said, "Notice who didn't leave the keys in the ignition." "Well, I feel a lot better," I said. "How nice for you," Heather snapped. About 1 in the morning, Troy pulled out onto a narrow bridge and slowed the van down. "Colorado River," he sang out. and we all came lurching out of our sleep and looked down. Far below, the black surface of the river was reflecting starlight. Spooky. Past the bridge, we came to a filling station and trading post that was all closed down for the night. "No more phone calls," Troy announced decisively. Pug said we should break in for supplies, but everybody knew he was only talking. We turned down the road marked Lee's Ferry. After a couple of miles, we passed some parking lots, a campground, and a ranger station. The road dead-ended at a wide concrete boat ramp at the river. There were a couple of cars in the lot there, some bathrooms, and good overhead light. "Nobody's around," Troy said. "Perfect. Okay, you guys, we know how to rig, just like we did at Westwater. Pump up the boats, rig frames, stow all the rocket boxes and dry bags, tie everything down. Dry bags in between the nets in the middle of the paddle raft, everything else on the oared raft. And whisper. Let's see how fast we can get out of here and slide downstream." Pug hadn't been listening. Pointing over at a sign, he said, "Get a load of this. Private boaters must register permit with the river ranger." What a laugh! Anybody see any river rangers? We set to work. We rigged the boats. We were out of our minds with anticipation. Were we really going to do this? We weren't just talking about it? Troy drove the van and the trailer into a dirt lot, then came back. We were dead tired. The first hint of dawn was starting to show, and still no river rangers. Nobody at all. "We gotta get out of here," Troy said. We hustled. It was all a blur, but finally the boats were rigged. "Hey, where's Heather?" Rita said suddenly, and she wasn't whispering. Everybody looked around, and the realization sunk in. "She split," Rita said. "Heather split." Of course, I thought. It makes perfect sense. "Run up to the John," Troy ordered. "Check both of them." Adam and Rita came running back. "Gone," they said, breathing hard. "What do we do?" "Yeah," Pug said. "What if she squeals?" Troy reached for his life jacket. "Forget it. So she squeals." We moved toward the boats. One was a paddle raft with all of our personal stuff in the dry bags, and one was the road raft with all the food and group gear. "Who's rowing?" I asked. Al had rowed on the Westwater trip. "I am," Troy answered. "Let's get going." "You got a river map, Troy?" Freddie asked. Troy waved his arms impatiently. His eyes were jumpy. I'd never seen him nervous like this before. "I got my Arizona road map," he said. "It's got the river on it." He didn't say it like a joke. That was the thing. Adam didn't even make hay out of it, and he'd never been handed a better setup. This was the moment. We could have backed out right there. We all looked around at each other, and I bet we were all thinking the same thing. We didn't really know what we were doing, yet we dared each other into this. If we backed down now, our self-respect was going to go down the tubes. We'd be totally whipped. Of all people, I grabbed my paddle and stepped into the paddle raft. Maybe I wanted to make up for the phone call, or for being the one who kept us from the top of Storm King Peak. "We'll make it up as we go," I said. "We can't get lost. You just float downriver." Star was right behind me. "I'm with Jessie," she said. Troy was pleased. "We can scout the rapids as we come to 'em. Remember how good we were in Westwater." "I want my mother," Pug sang, and everybody laughed. And then we were off, paddling for the current in the dawn, the ramp slipping away behind us. We paddled through a riffle, alongside a low cliff on the left, and passed into the rising walls of a canyon. With a look back, I saw the water tower at the ranger station disappear. Troy rowed his boat alongside ours. Barely above us, bats were zooming at crazy angles. "Let's put that bridge behind us before we stop," Troy advised. "Well, guys, we're really doing it. We're pirating the Grand Canyon of the Colorado." "Pirates of the Colorado!" Pug roared. He pulled out his buck knife, an item Al never knew about, and put it between his teeth. "Ninja pirates!" Adam declared. Rita bounced up and down on the front of the raft. "Bring on the Grand Canyon! We'll kick its butt!" And there was Freddie, with a beautiful grin on his quiet face, his eyes drinking in the water, the walls, the bats, and the last reluctant stars. Chapter 7. We passed under the bridge, a graceful arch composed of hundreds of steel girders, towering above us in this world of stone and sky like a monumental work of art. There was an eerie quality about it, as if it were the vestige of an ancient civilization. No vehicles crossed it, no one stood at the rail and waved to us. The river tugged at us and we bobbed along downstream. The bridge was receding, and the sight sent a thrill down my spine. Ahead, only rock, water, sky, and the unknown. In the next instant, the thrill turned to fear, and I wished myself up on that bridge looking down. What was I doing? Was I out of my mind? The canyon walls echoed the passage of a big truck. We all looked back. It was a beer truck. "Wish I had a rocket launcher," Pug said wistfully. "Darn," Adam said. "I knew we forgot something." "I'd blast that truck right off the bridge and watch it fall all the way down to the river. Wouldn't that be a beautiful sight?" It was touching to see Pug so affected by beauty. "We'd be picking up beer all the way down the canyon," Rita said. The current swept us around a little bend in the river, and the bridge was lost from view. It may as well have been hundreds of miles behind us. From somewhere along the shore came the most delightful bird song I'd ever heard in my life, a series of lyrical whistles cascading in pitch and slowing as they fell. Star and I looked to each other. It was one of those moments you share with somebody, moments you never forget. She was so happy. Those green eyes were singing their own song. There the song came again, and again. "I wish I knew its name," I said. "Canyon wren," Freddie volunteered. "How do you know?" Pug asked. Freddie didn't bother to answer, just paddled on, with his eyes on the cliffs high above. It was almost as if he were reading lines in a book, his concentration was so focused. A mile or so later, he cocked one ear downstream, and then the other. I couldn't tell what he was hearing. Just then Troy yelled over from his boat. "What's that sound?" Troy seemed kind of spooked. I still couldn't hear anything. "Listen," he said. "Listen." There was a background hum, or a vibration or something, coming from downstream. "An airplane," Pug guessed. I glanced at Freddie and saw a quiet smile on his face. "Tape hiss," Adam declared. "Canyon tape hiss." Then it dawned on everybody at once. First rapid, of course. This was a whitewater river, after all. We rounded a bend, and the sound wasn't so subtle. "Tape roar is more like it," I said. "River thunder," Adam named it. "Prepare to die, fun hogs." About 300 yards downstream, the river seemed to end on its own horizon line. Past that spot, the river wasn't visible at all. It looked like we were approaching a waterfall. The current almost died out, and we had to paddle downstream toward that brink as if we were on a lake. The river thunder grew louder and louder. We scouted the rapid. Thank goodness we scouted it. We didn't know what it was called. Its name wasn't on our Arizona road map. We didn't know how bad it was supposed to be, or how we were supposed to run it. I know how it looked. Awful. It was all full of whitewater and studded with rocks, as the river narrowed and took a big fall. The main current led into waves bigger than any we'd seen in Westwater Canyon, but it seemed like the only way through was to go right into the big waves. To either side were boulders sticking up, and underneath them, violent holes. Everybody was standing around pointing, shouting to be heard over the roar of the rapid. I was right next to Freddie. "How'd all those boulders get in the river?" I asked him. "Did they fall off the cliffs?" Freddie pointed out two side canyons, one entering the rapid on each side of the river. I think they were washed out of those canyons. Flash floods. I was amazed. The side canyons were bone dry. To think they could run with so much water as to carry down boulders as big as cars and deposit them way out in the river. As we silently walked back to the boats, I felt the drums of doom in my ears. I looked upstream and wondered if we should give it all up. I thought about yelling out, calling for a conference. I said nothing. Mechanically, I picked up my paddle as Star picked up hers. She was sort of looking to me for reassurance. Just down the shore, Troy was stowing his bowline. Then he nudged his boat offshore and started rowing for the current. Star and I hugged each other, then laughed nervously at the odd feel of bumping life jackets. Adam, I could see, was thinking of poking a little fun, but he was too nervous. "Let's get with it, kiddies," Troy called. "You gotta save me if I flip." "I wish he wouldn't say that," Star fretted. "Let's go," Rita yelled. "Quit making such a big deal of this." With our hearts jumping, we paddled out into the current, then slowly drifted toward the spot along the brink we'd picked. Ahead of us, Troy went over the edge and quickly disappeared. It was a heart-stopping sight. Then it was our turn. We picked up speed as the current flowed down the tongue. Into the Valley of Death, I thought, rode the 600. And then we were into a churning fury of white water. Suddenly, sideways in the big waves, the boat felt so unstable I thought we might tip over. I glanced to the very back of the boat to see if Pug was ruddering with his paddle. He didn't seem to know what he was doing. In fact, he was doing the opposite of what he should have been, and was causing us to get sideways. Fool's luck. The rapids spit us out. We rode through the tail waves, and then we were looking back up at the rapid, which looked like a staircase of white water. We were all cheering as we paddled our boat toward Troy's, and the canyon walls echoed Pug's war whoops. Troy was doing a victory dance atop the cooler, toward the front of his boat. "We can do this!" Troy yelled. "Perfect run! I hardly have any water to bail." For the laid-back guy that he was, it was a major demonstration, and psyched us up still higher than we already were. Pug followed his captain's lead and started dancing on the gear in the middle of our boat until Rita yelled, "Hey, that's our dry bags, you rhino! You're gonna crush all our stuff!" Pug looked bewildered, like a little boy chastised when he thought he was doing good. "Crush what? Like what?" "Cookies?" Adam suggested hopefully. Rita was standing up and had her hands on her hips. "What do you want, a list of what's in everybody's dry bag? For Pete's sake!" Pug slowly got off the gear. Confused, he didn't know whether to attack or apologize. "Hey, guys," Troy said. "Remember, we're all in this together, and we're awesome!" "Right on," Pug agreed. The day was warming up. At last, we were in the direct sunshine. Even though it was October, it was plenty warm, at least on those bends of the river that took the direct sun. Troy took off his shirt and started working on his tan. The rest of the guys followed suit. We landed for a pit stop. I found Troy and whispered to him about Pug, how he almost flipped us. "Maybe you should teach him," I suggested, "or else somebody else can be the rudder." Troy called Adam and Freddie over to talk, and I walked away. The guys were awfully macho about the rudder position. They assumed that none of the girls was strong enough to apply the torque necessary for a radical steering maneuver. Maybe I was, I thought, and Rita too. Heather for sure, with her wide shoulders, if she weren't so afraid. It was almost a shock to realize Heather was no longer among us. A few hours downstream, and we might as well have known her in another lifetime. She'd stayed behind, and we'd entered a separate reality.